Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
I do thank you for giving me just a couple of minutes of your time. That's all I need. If I'm the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, you, my listener with an open collar or a regular tie, can become the smartest person in your category by simply tuning in for a few minutes and getting the highlights and being, I think, more optimistic, more can-do, more loco-centric, more Nooga-centric. That is our goal here. We are at 800-8949, 800-8949, and I'm going to take the rest of the day off here. And we're going to talk with Sam Spade in a relaxed moment. And the number is 800-8949, 800-8949. David Tulis, The David Tulis Show at Nooga Radio. And Sam and I have a topic we just like to talk about. And it comes up between us in private conversation. And so I thought, well, let me benefit you, my listener, to hear our amusements, you might say. We're going to be musing. Now, I was at a bowling alley yesterday with a relative from out of town, and I pointed out to my son that we were part of amusement at the bowling alley, especially in the arcade, which just made me just go dizzy with all the noise and all the lights. Amusement is not thinking, right? If you are amusing yourself, you are not thinking. But when you're musing, you are thinking. And that's what we hope to do here. And we do welcome you along for the ride with Sam Spade, who, like I, is a fan of the coming trend. We are looking at the mega trend right now. The mega trend as regards Chattanooga. Will Chattanooga do well in the coming era, in the era that we are strongly convinced will be highly decentralized, and there will be, as we hope to explore, a devolution of authority, power, and economic self-determination that we don't have today. We don't have it today, as Sam will explain, for various reasons, and we are operating under a tremendous burden. But that burden will become so great as we think maybe that there will be a crisis in confidence, a crisis in liquidity that will give new opportunities that we don't have now, and we can't possibly get there without the disaster ahead. Sam, what do you think that disaster will look like? Why do we have a short-term grim perspective?
Well, the big reason, the fundamental reason, as far as I'm concerned, is the fact that our money is created out of thin air. It has no backing of a physical nature. It's not a substance of some nature that had to be earned up front, but it's simply printed by a government who then spends it in any way they want to try and control the direction that our society and our world goes. And that has gotten to the point where it's playing out. That game is ending. And when our dollars finally stop being worth anything, as they are unfortunately going to do, I believe, in the not too distant future, the centralized control system that depends on those dollars, that depends on the government printing them and buying our acquiescence, buying the local economies, power structures, paying for school types of programs, paying for police, paying for all of the local economy, that's going to stop. All of the checks are going to stop, or if they continue, they're going to be worth very, very little. With that disappears the control that the centralized federal government has over us. And the question is, what's going to happen to us as individuals and as a nation when that occurs?
Well, you're missing one element in that projection there. But what is going to happen to us as individuals or a nation? Are there any intermediate bodies, Sam, for which we might be concerned?
Well, of course, to use a crude analog, a rough analog, think of the death of the dinosaurs. When the meteors struck and created a massive ecological shift, an ecological shock wave, and all of the big structures, which is to say the federal government, the equivalent, they all died. All the big dinosaurs died. But that didn't mean the smaller dinosaurs died, nor did it mean that the small mammals died, nor did it mean the birds that were coming into existence died. The smaller creatures continued to survive. So it's not just that only bacteria survived that. If it had been a worse event, only bacteria would have survived. The important point is that when a stress occurs on a system, the large structures feel it first, they collapse and disappear the first, and then it goes down to smaller structures. And so your question really is, in this economic crisis, if the federal government cannot hold together, what can? Can the states hold together? Or is it, in fact, regional structures that hold together? And I think there's a very, very good chance that it will be the cities that hold together and provide the groundwork and the strength for the way our economy will then regenerate and survive.
So my listener here, our listener here, Sam, in the Chattanooga area, should be thinking in terms not necessarily, not exclusively of his individual future or those of his children or the nation, but really the city. There needs to be a kind of city-centric interest that he could take maybe for his profit. Well, what if we have a devolution? Let me just ask you. Let's see if we can list the things that are part, the scenes, the headlines, if you will, that would be part of the devolutionary prospect. I think major elements of that deconstruction will happen within about 5 or 6 years at the longest period. What are the elements of that collapse, if you will?
Well, the first one, the way we're going to be seeing things immediately, is that the banks are no longer going to be able to be open. Your money will no longer be traded. You will no longer find that it starts to buy things. And then you'll be thrown back immediately on the issue of barter for getting the necessities of life. Barter doesn't necessarily mean trading a chicken for a doctor's services, but it certainly could mean trading your services for doctor services. It could mean finding an intermediary who has something to offer like gold or silver and beginning to use that as an intermediate form of money.
Well, direct trade is highly inconvenient. People would quickly shift to some medium of exchange other than you fix my medical condition and I'll fix your plumbing. I mean, that's just too awkward to last more than a day.
Exactly. But the point is that if any form of alternate money that you can think of without the banking system is inherently a local form of money. I mean, I can't, and let's take, for the sake of argument, that silver coins become a medium of exchange. The dollar no longer is acceptable. People don't trust it anymore. And so they say, I want something else. What can you give me? Well, you can give them silver coins. Well, you can't pay with silver coins for something you buy on Amazon. You can only pay for it for a local activity that you can get to within a reasonable effort. And that means a city, local range within a city becomes the sort of economic environment that you wind up working in.
So we won't have a national economy, but a series of regional economies, each with their own mediums of exchange, which could be a private bank issue, private digital issue, phone currencies that have a local buying area, a local buying range.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we're looking though, Sam, at we got this chart. If you want to look on YouTube, I'm holding up for my viewer a very messy page of writing. And on the right side there is a chart. Down one column, I've got under the heading of devolution, I've got several points, and I want to see if we can engage Sam on what those points are. That would be the bad news, if you will. And then on the right hand column, under the word rebuilding, would be the good news. In other words, how you, my listener, and I, and Sam, and his family can take advantage of and make the most of and insightfully deal with the economy on the rebuilding side. Now we have a phone call. We do thank you for calling. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949. And caller, you're on the air with David Tulis and Sam Spade. What's on your mind?
I'm going to throw a little monkey wrench in your conversation and
not
amuse you guys, but amuse you guys.
Okay, go ahead.
Money, by the way, is not just a medium of exchange. Money has a store of value historically. So it has to have a store of value, or it can't be money. What good is it? A year later, if it's only worth half of the original value, it's not money. Money legally is any medium adapted or adopted by a foreign or domestic government. Our money of account of these states united is gold and silver coinage, primarily silver coinage. That's never changed. It's still the money of account of the United States. However, here's where I'm going to amuse you. I don't think, even though I'm a gold and silver guy, that that's going to work when the economy collapses, because you can't eat gold and silver. I think food, medium of exchange as it was at the time the American Indians were feeding us when we landed back in 1492 or some years after that. So the medium of exchange when the collapse occurs initially, I believe, is going to be food.
Mike, it can't be
we
food.
Have a 3-day supply of food in
It can't
America,
be food because
and
food.
then after that, maybe we'll go to something like wampum, and then maybe something with a store of value that can be easily divisible and exchanged, like maybe silver.
Right. Well, food can't possibly work because it goes bad. Food cannot work because it does not hold the value. It goes bad.
Well,
it doesn't go bad that day when you're buying it, when you're purchasing it. You're hungry and someone comes up to you and says, "Can you please paint the side of my house and I will feed you?" You've just bartered.
That's unworkable for very long. That system doesn't work for more than a few days.
No, what I'm trying to tell you is that's how we started out. And then that's how it will start out. And then what will happen is we'll find something with a store of value, maybe gold and silver. And then David Tulis will build a box that stores that, because you don't want to carry heavy gold and silver ingots. And David will take that ounce of silver and put it in his little deposit box, because we all trust David Tulis, and issue a receipt for that. And we won't have to carry around this heavy silver because we know we can always go back.
Mike, finish up.
And get the silver.
Okay, well, hang on a second. Let Sam answer what you said. Sam, go ahead, answer.
I believe that there's a grain of truth in what you say about food being a medium of exchange. I don't believe it all goes bad right away. Dried food, dried beans, for instance, will keep quite a while. But you need a two-way flow in order to get a medium of exchange to function. One of the advantages that small cities have is that most of them, and Chattanooga is an excellent example of that, have very arable land surrounding the city for quite a ways. So if you imagine a 50-mile range in which one could drive a small vehicle or a truck, that gives you an area of a lot of food that could be supplying Chattanooga. But you got to have something to go in the other direction. What is it that you're thinking of goes in the other direction? What do the farmers need?
Well, it could be, Sam Spade, it could be Bitcoin. It could be some other medium of exchange that that innovative people who see that there's a market there will immediately create that thing. And there'll be probably several versions of it. And finally, one will become popular because it's believable, it holds its value. Well, we're talking with Sam Spade. This is David Tulis, and we're looking at the future of Chattanooga as the United States, as we think, will be devolving and collapsing. Hopefully, the lights will go out in Washington sometime soon, and it will leave us alone. We're looking at the left side of the ledger, which is the devolution part, the bad news. And if you mind if I just throw a couple of these out, Sam. Implosion of purpose, loss of confidence among the people for the national government, even hatred and contempt of the federal government, and the ending of services. That's part of the devolution. In other words, those things are happening along with loss of confidence in the paper dollar. They will require people in Chattanooga to think independently of national support, national context. It will be a kind of isolating series of effects against Chattanooga, which are bad news and bad headlines, I would say.
Well, they are, but they're also good news in another sense. Right now, Chattanooga bears very heavy burdens from having to ship a lot of their economic production to a central Washington system that chews most of it up in bureaucracies, paying high salaries and employing them on projects such as international adventurism that doesn't really come back to home at all in any sense. Washington is determined.
Benefit.
Yes, Washington is determined to use our resources and what we produce to maintain an international empire. And that is part of what is coming to the end.
A fracturing global hegemony, you could say.
Yes, and that is part of what is failing. The advantage is that when you look at Chattanooga and you say, well, suppose this long-term monetary system ceases to work, what do we have locally that will supply our own needs? And two in particular that are very important. One I just mentioned is the fact that we have arable land. We can wind up with a lot of food being grown around us that will wind up coming into the city in exchange for services that we provide the farmers that grow it. The other, one of those services, is the fact that we have a dam literally in the middle of this city that produces enough power to supply all of the light needs of the city, and therefore all of small manufacturing that we might decide to undertake in this city.
That's the point I hadn't thought about, Sam. I hadn't thought about that.
Oh, well, yes. You know, the worry that I have in that respect is that we have also 2 nuclear power plants around here, and We know what can happen to nuclear power plants if they stop getting the support they need to continue to function safely.
You mean meltdown?
Meltdown or leakage or something might come in to pollute the rivers. Just I'm concerned about the nuclear power plants.
You're thinking if the lights go out in Washington, there may be lack of support for the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which of course is just a troublemaker for the nuclear industry. It doesn't really do anything to provide any real value. That industry provides the value and maintains the safety of its system.
Well, the issue it really revolves around sophistication of the technology necessary to keep a nuclear power plant safe. You don't need a lot of sophisticated technology to keep a dam safe. You need a lot more to keep a nuclear power plant safe.
All right, so this discussion about the nuclear dangers would be on the left-hand column, which would be on the devolution side, the coming meltdown, the coming fracturing of national authority. Is that right?
Yes, that
is
that's
correct.
potential
bit of bad news, a bad headline, you might say, in some future edition of the probably still in print Chattanooga Time-Free Press, which I expect will always be there. Serving Chattanooga. The print editions are not going to go away because we have too many common people like me. I like my print edition of the paper. But okay, well, we're going to get to, hang on, listener, we're going to get to the good news ahead. But we're trying to figure out column one on the left-hand side, the devolution, the bad headlines. I would also put in there, there are two. One is called blowback and militarization. That would be blowback from a military adventure overseas. That could be terrorist acts, sort of insurrections, probably not Muslim connected, but it could be, and sort of militarization by the state against the people through police departments, which are effectively armies of occupation. They are standing. These are standing armies. Police departments are standing armies, which are not allowed in our constitutional system. So that would be the increasing use of those rather than their diminution. Though on the other side, I would suggest, Sam, that on the other side of the crisis, that series of structures in the area will be largely defanged and will be much more peaceful-oriented and peacekeeping, more in the common law tradition than in the military corporate tradition.
Yes. Keep in mind that much of the funding for our police organization and much of the funding for the about there is comes from the federal printing press. If that federal money stops flowing into Chattanooga to support all of these programs, they're going to have to survive based on local support. That means they're going to have to be a whole lot more careful about keeping local people happy and being concerned about local sensitivities. You wind up being a far more responsive system if it is local only, if it is financed locally, if it is completely administered locally. One of the nice things about Chattanooga is I know personally, and I'm not a really long-term. I came here 5 years ago, so I'm not a long-term Chattanooga resident. And yet I personally know somebody who personally knows somebody who knows the mayor. All right? I mean, that's only 3 levels. And this guy knows me and knows that I'm honest. You, Sam. All right? And Sam, of course, knows Dave Crockett. And Dave Crockett, of course, knows all of the power structures in Atlanta. So if I wanted Chattanooga, yes. Okay. So if I wanted to make a point to the power structures in Chattanooga about a problem that existed, I only have to convince my good friend here, and he only has to convince Dave Crockett before the point is made officially to the power structures that be. Now, you imagine that same thing having to go on to try and get the point to Senator in Washington, and you can see why Washington is so absolutely unresponsive to what's going on, whereas Chattanooga, suddenly freed from the ties to Washington, can become far more effective and responsive to problems and evolving more effectively.
We really do, Sam Spade, have representative government locally, and I think you're making a tremendous point. That's the levels of influence there is much. There are fewer rings you have to cross to get to the decision maker or the executive power. And on that point, by the way, my listener, contact your county commissioner today. Do it today. Google Hamilton County, Tennessee Commission, and send an email to your commissioner to support the Tim Boyd resolution that would clamp down on wild and reckless spending at the Convention and Visitors Bureau, which serves a public purpose here, using tax money collected from aliens, from visitors to Chattanooga, to fund promotion of Chattanooga and capital investments for tourist-connected structures, parks, and the like here. This is something he's asked me to convey to you, and I'm wholly in support of it. He is a kind of watchdog, and people like him need to be people like you, and people like you need to be people like him on that panel. So contact your county commissioner and ask the following. Please support Tim Boyd's efforts to reform and redirect the spending of the CVB, Convention Visitors Bureau. Okay, do that today. You, my listener, have an effect on somebody, okay? You can't affect Washington. Chuck Fleischman doesn't care what you have to say, but Tim Boyd does. And your county commissioner will look at every email that comes in. Every single one is carefully read, okay? It will be read by your county commissioner. Do that today. Do that today. We're talking with Sam Spade. We've got some great questions about the future of Chattanooga.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7